For 5 years, they had come to the table and offered their hand in partnership. For 5 years, their proposals were met with suspicion, their contributions with contempt, their potential with fear. They were the newcomers, the upstarts, the human problem. Today, the Galactic Conclave would solve that problem for good. But what happens when the gear you remove is the linchpin holding the entire machine together? What do you do when the silence of the departed is more terrifying than any declaration of war? And how do you ask for help from a civilization you have wronged, when they have already built a better galaxy without you? The galaxy watched in fear as humans abandoned the table. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe and like the video. It is the fuel that powers this channel. Alright, let's begin the story. Ambassador Lena Petrova sat in her designated chair and watched the Xylan delegate, a towering figure of living crystal named Zarth, wave his multifaceted hand. The gesture caught the light of the conclave's central star, refracting it into 1,000 points of cold, dismissive brilliance. The alien was speaking, his voice a series of resonant chimes that the translator rendered into smooth, condescending prose. He was talking about humans. Again, their proposal, while enthusiastic, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of galactic economics, Zarth chimed, his tone that of a teacher patiently explaining a simple concept to a hopelessly slow student. To grant a junior species like humanity primary mining rights in the Outer Rim territories, even with the resource-sharing clauses they've included, is to invite instability. They are too unpredictable, too volatile. Lena had heard these words, or variations of them, 1,000 times before. She had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Conclave for 5 grueling years. In those 5 years, she had watched a dozen major human proposals for joint scientific ventures, for mutual defense pacts, for humanitarian aid initiatives, all voted down. The reasons were always the same. Humans were too young as a species, too aggressive, too different from the serene, ancient, civilized races of the galaxy who had perfected the art of doing nothing for 10,000 years. The conclave chamber was a masterpiece of static grandeur, a testament to an empire that believed it had already achieved perfection. Beings from dozens of different worlds occupied their designated spaces. The Andromedan delegates sat in their floating, gel-filled chairs, their sleek, blue-skinned forms shimmering under the artificial lights. They were talking quietly among themselves, their telepathic whispers likely filled with the same tired jokes about the primitive, emotional apes. The Vorthari delegates, silicon-based life forms resembling statues of polished obsidian, sat motionless in their heated alcoves. They rarely spoke and never voted. Their abstention an act of supreme, silent indifference that always counted as a no. Lena looked down at her datapad. Today's proposal was simple, logical, generous. Human survey teams, using a novel, human-designed probability scanner, had located a cluster of mineral-rich asteroids in unclaimed space. The plan was to share the mining rights and the new scanning technology with any species that wanted to participate, creating jobs and distributing resources to dozens of developing worlds. It was a good plan. It would help people. But the Xylan delegate was now explaining, with painstaking slowness, why it was a terrible idea. They will use the mining operations to build weapons, Zarth predicted, his crystalline form pulsing with feigned concern. It is in their nature. We have all studied their history. When they find a new resource, they first ask, how can we build with it? And then, immediately after, how can we fight with it? The Signan matriarch, Valia, a graceful, avian-like being with feathers of iridescent silver, rose to support him. Her voice was smooth, melodic, and cold as the void. The ambassador from Xylos speaks wisdom, she cooed. We must remember that these are a people with a history of fighting total wars on their own home planet. They detonated fission devices in their own atmosphere. This proves they are not yet mature enough to work with peaceful species on matters of galactic security. Their passions overrule their logic. She reminded the conclave of the human wars from centuries ago, the world wars, the eugenics wars, the intercorporate conflicts, as if Lena's people had learned nothing, had not evolved, had not unified and reached for the stars in a desperate attempt to become better than their own bloody history. Lena wanted to stand up. She wanted to project the data onto the main screen. The 412 Class A distress calls a neutral space that only human ships had answered. The cure for the Cthar plague, developed in human labs and shared freely, saving billions. The trade agreements where humans had accepted lower profits to help stabilize a protectorate's economy. The rescue of the Cygnan colony on Cygnus X, one after a solar flare, a rescue her own people had attempted and failed at. But she knew it would not matter. Her files were filled with 5 years of failed arguments. The conclave had already made up its mind before the meeting had even started. They always did. The vote was called. A cascade of crimson lights, the color of denial, swept the chamber. The Xylans voted no. The Cygnans voted no. The Vorthari, as always, did not even bother to signal their silence a vote against. The smaller species, the ones who desperately needed the resources from the asteroids, the ones who had privately expressed support to her in quiet corridors, they stayed quiet. Their lights remained dim. They were afraid to go against the major powers. The final count appeared on the chamber's main screen. 47 votes against. 3 in favor. 2 abstentions. Another human proposal, another human hope, had failed. The Conclave Prime, a tall, gaunt being with skin like gray parchment, stood to close the meeting. The Conclave's decision is for the good of all species, he intoned, his voice echoing with the hollow ring of practiced rhetoric. Cooperation requires careful consideration. Hasty decisions, especially concerning resources, can lead to unforeseen conflicts. This matter is closed. Lena had heard this speech before, too. It was the same speech they gave every time they rejected a human proposal, every time they dismissed a human idea, every time they put humanity back in its box. Always the same empty words. Stability, cooperation, caution. But Lena knew the truth. They didn't want cooperation. They wanted control. They didn't fear conflict. They feared change. As the other delegates began to file out, their forms drifting, walking, or slithering toward the exits, Lena remained in her seat. Her face was a mask of calm, but her heart was beating a hard, steady rhythm against her ribs. She thought about her final instructions from the Terran Federation on Earth. If this proposal is rejected, President Eva Morales had told her, her face grim on the quantum comm screen. If the pattern of deliberate, systemic obstruction continues, then you are authorized to enact the Solitude Protocol. No further debate. No appeal. Just execute. Lena had hoped, had prayed, it would not come to this. She had genuinely believed that, eventually, the other species would see that humans could be trusted, that they would recognize the value of human ingenuity, human empathy, human grit. But after 5 years of constant rejection, of veiled insults, of being treated like a clever but dangerous pet, she knew the truth. The Galactic Conclave would never accept humans as equals. The chamber was almost empty now. Only a few delegates remained, talking quietly in small groups, likely congratulating themselves on another crisis of progress averted. Zarth and Matriarch Valia were among them, their forms radiating smug satisfaction. Lena stood up slowly and gathered her materials. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She knew that what she was about to do would change the galaxy forever. She was not just an ambassador anymore. She was an executioner. She walked not toward the exit, but to the center of the chamber, where the main archival recording equipment was located. She knew her words would be logged, stored for eternity, and transmitted to every member world within hours. The few remaining delegates stopped their conversations and turned to look at her, their alien features showing surprise and confusion. This was not normal behavior. A defeated ambassador was supposed to leave quietly, with dignity. Lena cleared her throat. Her voice, when it came, was clear, calm, and carried the weight of a decision 5 years in the making. I am Ambassador Lena Petrova, representing the Terran Federate. Ion and the planet Earth, she began. Today marks the 15th time in 6 months that this conclave has rejected a human proposal without serious consideration or counteroffer. She let that fact hang in the air. We have offered cooperation. We have offered shared resources. We have offered peaceful solutions and mutual benefit. We have responded to 412 Class A distress calls in neutral space when others would not. We shared the cure for the Cthar plague freely, saving billions of your citizens. We stabilized the trade route through the Serpent's Nebula, a feat your own engineers deemed impossible. A Cygnan delegate started to approach, probably to interrupt her, to call her to order. Lena raised her hand, a simple, human gesture, and the alien stopped, taken aback by its quiet authority. It has become clear, she continued, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more intense, that this conclave does not view humans as equals. You see us as a problem to be managed, not as partners to be respected. You use our services when you need them, our medics, our engineers, our soldiers, but you deny us a voice when decisions about the future of this galaxy are made. She picked up her official diplomatic credentials, the ornate data crystal that symbolized humanity's membership in the conclave. She held it in front of her. Therefore, by the authority granted to me by the unified government of the Terran Federation, I hereby announce that humanity formally withdraws from all Galactic Conclave proceedings, treaties, and accords. Effective immediately, the chamber was completely, utterly silent. The ever-present harmonic hum of the walls seemed to die away. Even the translation devices seemed to have stopped, as the few remaining species tried to process what they had just heard. Lena placed her credentials on the podium. A final, symbolic act of severance. Humanity wishes all conclave species well in their future endeavors, she said, her voice now devoid of all emotion. We will pursue our own path among the stars from this point forward. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps the only sound in the vast, silent chamber. Behind her, she could hear voices finally rising in a confused, panicked chorus. Stop her. Does she have the authority? What about the trade agreements? The rescue services? Lena did not stop walking. She had said everything that needed to be said. The galaxy had made its choice about humanity. Now humanity had made its choice about the galaxy. As she reached the chamber doors, she heard the Signan matriarch Valia shouting something about treaty violations and the economic chaos this would cause. But it was too late for that. The decision hadn't been made today. It had been made years ago. Every time they had voted against a human proposal. Every time they had treated Earth's representatives like children asking for favors. Every time they had praised human courage in one breath and condemned human ambition in the next. Lena walked through the doors and into the corridor beyond. She did not look back. Behind her, the Galactic Conclave was about to learn a very hard lesson. The lesson of what it means to lose something you never appreciated until it was gone. They had always assumed humans would keep coming back, keep trying, keep seeking the approval of their elders. They had assumed wrong. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you pushed the humans too far. And Lena suspected they would not like what they learned. The news of humanity's withdrawal spread across the galaxy faster than a supernova shockwave. Within days, every major news network was dissecting Ambassador Petrova's final, stunning speech. The reaction, from the core worlds of the conclave, was overwhelmingly positive. The Xylan news broadcast called it a victory for galactic stability. Their reporters, crystalline beings who communicated in shifting light patterns, explained that the volatile, unpredictable humans had finally realized they were not ready for civilized society. The Signan networks ran holographic specials about the end of the human problem. They interviewed somber experts who explained that this was the best possible outcome for everyone involved. Humanity's withdrawal allows them to mature at their own pace, without disrupting the delicate harmony of the galaxy, one scholar chirped. Even the smaller species, the ones who had relied on human aid and trade, seemed relieved. For years, they had watched humans challenge the established order, ask uncomfortable questions, and propose radical changes to systems that had worked perfectly fine for centuries. Now, those uncomfortable questions would finally stop. The Galactic Conclave moved with uncharacteristic speed to fill the vacuum left by humanity's absence. Trade routes that had been pioneered and managed by human shipping guilds were immediately redistributed among the established species. The Kthar, a powerful insectoid race, claimed the majority of the shipping contracts, citing their vast fleets and resources. Mining rights in the Outer Rim territories, the very territories discovered by human survey teams, were reassigned to Andromedan corporations. They argued that their advanced, safer technology made them the best choice for extracting resources without environmental risk. The fact that these same territories had been deemed worthless until a human-designed scanner found their hidden wealth was conveniently omitted from the official announcements. In the conclave chambers, meetings ran more smoothly than they had in years. Without human representatives demanding explanations, questioning precedents, or proposing disruptive alternatives, votes could be completed in record time. The major species praised the new era of efficiency and cooperation. But even as the self-congratulation continued, some things began to change. Small things at first, so small that most beings, cushioned by millennia of stability, did not notice them. The first sign came from the Kepler sector, where a Vorthri mining station, one of the obsidian-like beings, reported a catastrophic equipment failure. A quantum drill, the pinnacle of Vorthri engineering, had encountered an unexpected geological formation of compressed metallic hydrogen and shattered. For decades, they had called human engineering teams for this exact kind of problem. Humans had a strange, almost unnatural talent for adapting alien technology to work in new and unexpected situations. They could look at a Vorthri drill, a Signan engine, and a Xylan power core and somehow figure out how to make them all work together. They were the galaxy's ultimate troubleshooters. The mining station sent out their usual Priority 1 request for human technical support. The message went out into the void and disappeared. No response came back. After 3 days of silence, the Vorthri contacted the Galactic Conclave for help. They were politely told that human technical services were no longer available under the new accords and that they should adapt their own equipment to handle the problem. The Vorthri engineers tried. They were brilliant, but their minds were rigid, logical. They knew how their drills were supposed to work. They had no framework for dealing with a situation where the rules of physics themselves seemed to be different. After a week of failed attempts, they had to abandon the entire mining operation, a loss of billions of credits. The Galactic Conclave classified it as an isolated industrial accident and moved on. Then came the second incident. A Xylan luxury liner, the Crystal Swan, carrying diplomats from 12 different species, suffered a catastrophic engine failure while traveling through the supposedly safe and well-charted Serpents Nebula. The ship's singularity core had developed a cascade failure that threatened to tear a hole in space-time and destroy the entire vessel. This was exactly the kind of emergency that human rescue teams had specialized in. Human ships were equipped with universal docking systems and multispectrum energy dampeners that could connect to and stabilize vessels from any species. Human engineers had studied the technology of dozens of different races. They were the only ones who could walk onto a Xylan bridge, a Signan engine room, and a Vorthri life support section and know how everything worked. The luxury liner sent out a frantic, galaxy-wide distress call. Several ships in the area received it. None of them could help. An Andromedan patrol cruiser tried to respond, but their docking systems were incompatible with the Xylan ship's crystalline hull. They couldn't get a secure connection. A Kthar cargo hauler had the right technical equipment to patch the engine, but their crew, who only understood their own technology, didn't know enough about Xylan singularity physics to attempt repairs without causing a black hole. The crisis lasted for 6 agonizing hours before the liner's crew managed to stabilize their engines using a desperate, last-ditch emergency procedure. By then, half the passengers had been exposed to dangerous levels of temporal radiation. The diplomatic conference they were traveling to had to be postponed indefinitely. Again, the incident was classified as unfortunate. The conclave issued new safety regulations. But the incidents kept happening, faster and faster. A research station in the Outer Rim, a joint venture between 6 different species, lost contact with the Galactic Communication Network when their central relay array failed. The array was a complex, beautiful, and utterly incomprehensible hybrid of technologies that only a human specialist, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, had ever fully understood. Without her, the schematics were just gibberish. The station went dark. A trade convoy carrying medical supplies vanished in an asteroid field. The asteroids contained unusual mineral deposits that interfered with standard scanning equipment. The convoy captain, in his final log entry, noted with bitter irony that the last human trader he'd spoken to had warned him about this exact region, telling him he needed a special, human-designed sensor modification to pass through safely. The captain had dismissed it as a sales pitch. A colony ship carrying refugees from a natural disaster broke down in deep space. Their life support systems were failing. Several rescue ships responded, but none could provide the specialized parts and knowledge needed to fix the alien life support technology. The refugees died, slowly and quietly, in the cold dark. Each incident by itself was manageable. A tragedy, yes, but the galaxy was vast. But the pattern was becoming terrifyingly clear to anyone who was paying attention. For a century, humans had been the quiet, unthanked troubleshooters of galactic civilization. When something broke that no one else could fix, you called the humans. When you needed technology from one species to work with equipment from another, you hired human engineers. When disaster struck and you needed someone who could think outside the box, who could improvise, who could jury-rig a solution out of spare parts and pure, stubborn grit, human crews were always the first to volunteer. The other species had taken this for granted. They had seen it not as a unique skill, but as the proper role of a junior servant species. They had assumed human services would always be available, a galactic utility they were entitled to. They had not realized how often, how deeply, they relied on human problem-solving skills to keep their ancient, creaking, and hopelessly complex civilization running. Now those services were gone. Human ships had vanished from the space lanes. Human engineers no longer answered emergency calls. Human traders who had connected distant, incompatible worlds were nowhere to be found. The silence from human space was absolute. Complete. Ships that approached the Sol system were met by automated warning beacons that politely but firmly requested them to maintain their distance. The warnings were not threatening. They were absolute. No exceptions will be made for any reason. As the months passed, the accumulated effect of small problems began to add up to big ones. Supply chains frayed. Alliances strained. The carefully balanced, perfectly ordered galaxy of the Conclave was beginning to shake. They had always thought of themselves as the important ones, the ones who made the big decisions. But humans, it turned out, had been the essential ones. The ones who made sure everything actually worked. And now they were gone. The galaxy had pushed them away. And in the silence, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to hear the terrifying sound of their own civilization, slowly, inexorably, falling apart.